Welcome to the DisabiliTEA, a podcast where we have candid discussions about all things related to disability. Short-term, long-term, financial claims, impact on other areas of life, causes in the workplace, and more. With your host, attorney Anjel Burgess. You can find this show at www.disabilityhelpline.com and on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now here's the host of the DisabiliTEA, Anjel Burgess.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the DisabiliTEA. Today, we are pleased to have with us attorney Bill Gentry. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you so much. Good to be here, Anjel.
Well, we are very excited to talk with you today. So let's just dive right in. And first, Bill, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about you and your practice.
Yes, we've been practicing law. I was admitted to the bar actually in 1986. I just passed my 38-year mark of practicing law in the state of Georgia. I'm very proud of that.
Congratulations.
We've got a law firm, Gentry Law Firm, which is geared primarily towards helping people through divorce, legitimation, family law, and similar kind of what we used to call domestic relations cases. Anything to do with folks who are together, maybe they have children, maybe they don't. And over the years, probably represented 2,000 or 3,000 people in connection with different various and family law cases.
That is wonderful. One of the things, Bill, that I've learned from just knowing you and learning more about you is that you have written a book, which I have a copy of as well, that I want everyone to learn about today. This book is called I Want Out, and it is a woman's guide to finding peace through divorce. So, Bill, I would love to start off talking about the book, kind of the inspiration for the book, and just some tools that you would like to share with our audience.
Yes, Angel, we over all of these years of practicing law and talking to so many women, we got to see just a recurring pattern of women who are married to men who simply emotionally and unfortunately sometimes physically dominated them in a way that they felt trapped. One of the things out of the narcissist playbook, for example, is to drive away friends and family so that you only get a sense of emotional identity from your husband. And at that point, the husband has much more control over you. They do things like feeling like they have to walk on eggshells. They dread their husband coming home. All of these sorts of things. And we heard it so many times. I thought, I have to help more women than I can help as a divorce lawyer coming in the door to my office. And so we wrote this book, and we were very privileged to have Forbes Publishing publish the book with us. And what it is it talks about the different, how you go through the divorce process. It talks about discovery. It talks about analyzing the information. It talks about getting to resolution. We use what we call the DARE acronym: discovery, analysis, resolution, and empowerment. Empowering you to reach that better life that we know can happen once the divorce process is finished.
Wonderful. I'll tell you, one of the things that really resonated with me once I learned that you had written this book, Bill, is I find in many cases that I have clients who over the years, have been dealing with health issues, which has led them to me to help with the disability process. But my clients many times do not have a spouse that's supportive. And through the, just kind of dealing with the nature of whatever condition that has impacted my client, there has been some strain on the marriage. And I've had many occasions where just in conversation, my client has said, we're either in the process of divorce or we're talking about divorce, but we are going to figure it out ourselves, and we're going to work through all the details ourselves. We don't need an attorney to help us. We can work through it ourselves. So I really want to have you speak to that and what the impact of just, working it out yourself can do, especially for the female that has been, because of health situation, has been dependent on or relying on their spouse up until now, and they're talking about getting divorced.
No, and you really hit the nail on the head there, Angel, because look, even the best of marriages have rocky times.
Right.
And in some marriages it's rockier. And you overlay a disabling injury, for example, on the woman, and everything gets much more stressful. Everything gets much more stressful. And sometimes people get to the point where they can't even talk to one another. And so this whole story about we'll just work it out. Don't worry, we'll work it out. I can't tell you how many times folks come in to see me and say, well, my husband says we're going to work it out. So should I trust him? And I said, well, this is the person who you said has taken money out of bank accounts with your knowledge. This is the person who has alienated your children against you. This is the person who is cheating on you. Do you trust him to work it out in your best interests? And so that's something that I really try to get people to understand. If there are other areas in which you cannot trust this person, be very careful about saying that, oh yeah, I trust him to work it out fairly, because most often that's not going to happen.
Right. I imagine so. What are some of the things or concerns, that the woman should, and deciding or talking about, well, we'll just work it out ourselves. What are some of the things that they should keep in mind as you're talking about, oh, we're going to make sure everything is fair? What are some of the things that they need to be concerned about?
Well, there are many things. For example, if you've been blessed enough to accumulate some assets, you really want to be sure that there is a fair division of assets. If there happens to be debt, you want to be careful that if you're on Social Security disability, for example, don't get saddled with a bunch of debt that's going to eat up all of that usually fairly small Social Security monthly check. So you want to be very careful with that. And look, we've got children who are a whole separate issue here, because way too often, Angel, what we see is dad comes in and says, Mom, you're so disabled, you can't really care for these kids, so they're going to live with me.
Right.
And even before that, they'll go to the kids and say, well, your mom, she's not really who she used to be. You want to come and live with me, don't you? And begins poisoning the children's mind against mom. It's horrible. It's horrible. And very often not true what dad is saying about mom in this situation.
Right. Okay. And what about, besides assets and debt and the children, in working out kind of the details of divorce, especially in a situation where, the woman has a disability, health insurance, are there ways that they can work out to make sure that, let's say maybe she's not getting disability yet. Let's say she's going through the process and she had health insurance through her spouse, and now they're talking about divorce. What happens in that situation with health insurance?
Well, health insurance is always a tricky issue. Now, if husband and wife get divorced and the wife has been on the husband's health insurance and the employer is big enough then the wife has the ability to get COBRA health insurance that goes on beyond the end of the divorce for up to 3 years. Now, unfortunately, COBRA health insurance through the husband's account can be very expensive. And a lot of people end up going to the marketplace to get health insurance that way. Sometimes it just makes sense, even though you'd love to be divorced from the guy, you just say, I need this health insurance too much. Maybe once I get, but because you're the expert on Social Security and Medicare, I guess it's a couple years after they get their Social Security before they can get on Medicare.
So that's a great point that, it's important to talk with an expert to think about some of these situations. Like maybe divorce isn't a good option right now. because of the health insurance issue, which makes sense. And maybe they can be a little more strategic about planning for the divorce and making sure that the spouse with the disability has, been approved for disability, is Medicare eligible before they file for divorce. That
Yes.
makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, that's very, and getting with an expert like you, getting with a divorce lawyer who knows about or has good connection with an expert like you in terms of integrating these two things to make sure there's not a lack in coverage. Because can you imagine, we've got one of these women who suddenly there's no insurance covering, and these bills can be astronomical. And we have to look out for these folks. So a lot of people say, well, I just want a legal separation. Well, Georgia doesn't have a legal separation status, but it's got something similar. Okay, it's called separate maintenance. And separate maintenance is something where you basically do everything towards getting a divorce, except you're not legally divorced, which means you can't remarry. And most of these folks, that's not high on their agenda, is getting remarried. But they want to be separated from this person. They want to stop possibly being responsible for debts they accrue. They want to be able to live separately, and maybe they want alimony. All of this can be done in this device called separate maintenance. So that's something that I would always encourage someone who, if, for example, you had a client who you said, Bill, I want you to talk to them because they're looking at something like separate maintenance because they just can't get divorced right now. They need the health insurance to continue.
Okay. And, that's a new term for me. See, this is why it's important to know people like you, Bill, because, that it makes a lot of sense. And it's something that sounds like can certainly protect the interest of the spouse that's not able to work, and making sure that they're still able to access the doctors, the medications, all the things that they need to have the best quality of life. So with the separate maintenance, child support, all of those things, I know you mentioned alimony, but child support is something that can be worked out as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And custody of the children, because in a separate maintenance situation, the parties are going to live apart. Okay. And so someone has to make the major decisions for the children. The children there has to be a schedule of parenting time for the two parents. But you also include things, and this is what we touched on earlier, maybe dad's trashing mom to the kids. Okay. We'll put into the parenting agreement, you shall not do this. Okay. Now, in a perfect world, they would stop, but in reality, sometimes there's still emotions are heated. But once you have this, it becomes an order of the court. And if someone violates it, you can actually go to the judge and say, Judge, my husband has been saying these things about me to the children. I would like you to order him to stop it. And the judge will say, Sir, you will stop, or you will get to spend some time in jail, which is pretty compelling.
Yes, absolutely. And so when it comes to the different options for arrangements, like the separate maintenance, or whether it's filing for divorce, or whatever the options may be, how does the woman pay now that they've been listening to this podcast, right? And they know, it's in my best interest to at least talk to an attorney and make sure that I'm considering all the options, all the things that could go wrong with us just getting divorced on our own. But I can't work. I'm trying to get disability. So how do I pay for an attorney? Do you have any tips or suggestions in those situations?
Yes, and whether someone is disabled, quite often someone will come in and they'll say, look, I'm a stay-at-home mom, not disabled. But, we've been married 25 years. I've got 3 kids. Some are out of the nest. Some are still at home. My husband had taken me off all the credit cards, off all the bank accounts. And, and lawyers in family law cases get paid by the hour. Okay. We don't have the option, like in some other areas of the law, being paid on a percentage or contingency basis. And so what I typically tell folks is this: there are probably few events more stressful than going through a divorce. And there are probably fewer things that are more complicated that you'll run into in life than going through a divorce. So what you want to do is be sure you get a good lawyer who's looking out for all of your interests, who can work together with the Social Security disability lawyer and make sure that everything is done in a way that will give you maximum protection. That being said, this is the time to call on friends and family to help you.
Hmm.
Okay. And most folks are going to say, I really don't want to impose on them. And frequently what I say back is, look, there are people out there who love you, who care about you, and want the best for you. And if you've gotten to the point where you've decided it's time to end this marriage, I guarantee you have friends and family members who feel the same way about this guy you're married to and will want to help you. And
Great.
almost without fail, these folks go out and they talk to friends and family and say, you're right. They think guy's horrible. They want to help.
Mhm. Okay. Well, and that's another great point, Bill, that I think it can be so easy to look at, well, I don't have this personally available, but I do see in many circumstances, excuse me, that individuals have supportive family members, they have supportive friends that are, more than willing to do anything to help them in their time of need and to make sure that they are adequately cared for. So it seems like it's a bigger risk to take to do it on your own, or to, rely on your soon-to-be ex-spouse to make good decisions for you. So, Bill, one of the questions that I often get, or comments that I often hear from clients when I tell them you really should talk with an attorney, just to make sure that your best interests are being protected before you decide to, go through the divorce on your own with your spouse. And one of the questions or comments that I often get is, well, I'm not working, so I can't afford to hire an attorney. Do you have any tips or pointers for women that may find themselves in that situation?
Angel, that's a great question. And it's one that we get a lot. In a divorce case, or really any kind of a family law case, legitimation, whatever, lawyers are prohibited by the rules of ethics that apply to us from taking such a case on a contingency or percentage basis. We have to charge either by the hour or as a flat fee. And
Okay.
so folks will come to me and say, oh, I don't have access to any funds. For whatever reason, maybe my husband has cut me off from all the money or taking me off checking accounts, credit cards. And I will tell them, I'll say, look, getting a divorce is probably one of the most important decisions you'll ever make. This is the time when you probably need to reach out to friends and family to help. And they'll say, well, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. And my response is, look, if you've gotten to the point in your relationship that you've decided it's time to get a divorce, probably your friends and family feel the same way about your husband as you do, maybe even more so.
True.
And I'll usually get a nod, say, you're right. I'm going to go have a conversation with them and see about that.
Okay. So family and friends, I see, are really great sources of support as people are going through disability. It certainly makes sense to, lean on those sources of support for something as important as getting divorced and making sure that, you get everything that you're entitled to. So I think that that's a great suggestion. Are there any other tips, pointers that you wish people knew maybe before they came to you that would help their situations a little bit better than coming to you when things are, really difficult, or, later on in the process?
Yes, probably the most important thing is to document, write it down. Be ready to share facts and information with the lawyer. Now, a lot of people do this, but then their husband finds it and gets rid of it. If you do it, it needs to be put in a secure location, a next door neighbor, a friend, a family member. Okay. You may do it electronically, but you want to be sure it's hosted at a place that is secure, that's password protected. You may not want your spouse to know that you're doing this. That's fine. You may not want to go high tech, old school pen and paper. I've found that there's something cathartic about actually writing down these things. Whether it's financial, whether it's abuse, whether it's alienating the children, all of these things can be important. One of the first things, Anjel, I ask folks when they come to see me is write down the story of your relationship. Start the day you guys met, bring it up to today. Okay, now if you want to write 1 page, that's fine. If you want to write 20 pages, that's fine. I don't care about spelling, punctuation, handwriting, as long as I can read it, because it is confidential, attorney-client privileged. Very cathartic. It's a much more efficient way of giving me the information I need, and it will be easy to refer to in the future to come back and say, oh yeah, client said this. Very, very helpful. So write it down.
Write it down. That is a great tip. Write it down, and make sure it's in a place that is secure. So
Right.
that's great information. Any other tips that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, just be thoughtful and deliberative about the process. Usually by the time folks come to see me, they've been through some really tough times. Remember, this person, your relationship has gotten to the point where you're coming to see a divorce lawyer. If they say, trust me, maybe not so much. If you've got an issue with Social Security disability, you're the expert on that. If you got a divorce with a situation with divorce, happy to help you. And we're always happy to work with experts in other fields where our cases intersect. So just be thoughtful, deliberative, but don't wait, because these issues probably aren't going to get better with time. They'll probably get worse. And what's the downside of just having a consultation, finding out what your rights are?
I agree. Couldn't agree more. The most important thing is to be intentional when you are thinking about divorce, and it's so important to know what your options are before you take steps to make sure that you're doing things that are going to protect you and look out for you. A consultation with an attorney such as Bill, who's an expert in the field, will help to lay out for you some of the considerations or things that you may not have thought of. So I think that is incredibly important to do. And Bill, I thank you so much for your time today, for sharing wisdom with us about the divorce process and just things to be aware of, and for the book. I mean, just a great resource, particularly for women who are going through the divorce process or thinking about going through the divorce process. So we appreciate your time today and your wisdom.
It's been my pleasure. And if you'd like more information, you can go to Gentry Law Firm, LLC on most major social media outlets and streams and get more information.
All right. And what about a phone number?
770-425-5573.
Thank you, Bill. This has been another episode of the DisabiliTEA. We appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to talking with you next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the DisabiliTEA with Anjel Burgess. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others. You can catch prior episodes at www.disabilityhelpline.com and on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.